Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to you, wherever you are. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful summer and it's not too hot where you are, or you may have a beach close by. We are actually waiting a couple of more minutes while everybody is joining before we can start this session. Thank you very much for taking time and partaking this session. Janice and I, we are very pleased to see you and hear from you at the end, to have a lively discussion about this wonderful book. So thank you for being with us today. My name is Georgie. In case you don't know me, I serve as the Dean of Graduate Studies at Ubiquity University, and this is the Great Books course. And this is the second session on the revelations of Aramaic Jesus by our wonderful Janice. She already gave us an extraordinary presentation in July. In case you missed it, you can always watch it on our YouTube channel. But now we can't wait to hear the second part. So over to you, dear Janice.
Thank you, Georgie. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm looking forward to discussion at the end in particular. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, we'll get started. So this is part 2 of the Revelations of the Aramaic Jesus, a book for our time, I believe. And I'd like to begin, as always, with a land acknowledgement. And I invite you to acknowledge the land on which you are located. I'm in Dundas, Ontario, Canada. Where I live is located on the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee people, binding them to share and preserve the land. In turn, all others have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. And now I would like to invite those of you who wish to join me in a centering meditative minute. So find a very comfortable sitting position. Relax your jaw and neck and your face muscles. Let your shoulders drop down and take a deep breath in and out. Find a breathing rhythm that's comfortable for you. And as we inhale and exhale, becoming aware that our breath is breathing us, we do not have to do anything. Starting now, I will time us for 1 minute. Okay, our minute is up. When you're ready, join us all back in the Zoom room. And before beginning part 2, I would like to mention that I responded to the question asked at the end of the first session about William Henry and the interface between William Henry and Neil Douglas-Klotz's thoughts about the Essenes. I answered it in the Great Books discussion section at the Ubiquity University website. And any questions that arise today that I am unable to respond to, I will respond in the Great Books discussion section again. And in addition, I will be posting a PDF in the Great Books section tomorrow that includes some of the books and podcast references that I've used or mentioned for this presentation. The chat does not allow a PDF to be placed in it, so I will put it there. And if that becomes a problem on the Great Books discussion section, because it's a fairly big file, I will direct you to my own website where you can get that, and I'll leave that information in the Great Books discussion section. The Aramaic Jesus. As mentioned during part 1, Neil, excuse me, to get a drink. Neil recommends letting the book speak to us. That is, respond to whatever jumps off the page into our laps and into our hearts, with no worries about what does not catch our attention. For some time later, when the time is ripe, other aspects of the book will unfold. And perhaps this is why Neil recommends reading the book slowly. From my standpoint, this book offers me guidance and insight into my personal questions and research questions. Today, I'm sharing with you aspects of the book that resonate with me. And over time, I have come to include this book as being an oracular book alongside Neil's latest publication, the Aramaic Book of Days, which Neil actually includes as being an oracular book. That is a book which offers guidance and wise counsel. So today I'm going to share with you aspects of the book that resonate with me. So we're going to talk about what and how Yeshua taught in his day, the significance of Yeshua's teachings today. We may touch on critics and creatives. We may not if we don't have time. And we'll talk about co-creating the future together. So the question that I'm really responding to today is what and how did Yeshua teach his students? And is his teaching relevant today? So I'm going to begin with the essence of his teaching, highlighting essential points as I did in part 1 with ripeness and Shem, etc. Today there are other important essential teachings, I believe, that we need to understand before we can understand why he did what he did and before we can follow in his footsteps. So I will be making reference today to the 3 basic concepts presented during part 1. The first being ripeness and unripeness, and these are Yeshua's terms for good and evil. Importance of becoming aware of what is ripe or unripe is important for Yeshua. And it's important for us because they're totally interconnected. They're not separate forces, ripe and unripe, good and evil. They are dependent on one another. They're interconnected. Now, Shem. Shem is our essence that is expressed through vibration, light, and sound that is interconnected with the essence of all others around us, above us, and beneath us, including trees and stones, well beyond just people. And caravan. In the ancient Aramaic worldview, there's no past, present, or future. Rather, we are moving along together with our ancestors and with those yet to come. In fact, we all have voices that can be heard in the present moment, in the present time, those from the past and those in the future. A central teaching that Neil brings forward is the I relationship. I briefly mentioned that the last time, but I want to expand on that because it's very important. So it's I versus I am. Focusing on the Aramaic language, Neil notes that the English translation I am is a mistranslation. First, the Aramaic language has no verb to be, as in I am. Rather, Neil describes the I relationship that Yeshua points to as a relationship between our small self, our nafsha, and our source, Eloha. Neil further characterizes this relationship as being between our small breath of our small self, nafsha, and the big breath of our source, ruha. So he really concentrates on both our small breath as we exist in our flesh and the big breath of our source. Yeshua was constantly pointing his students, his disciples, to his relationship with his source. He saw this as being the source of his essence, a source fully available to each of his students and, of course, to us. In this, Yeshua was emphasizing he was not the source. Rather, he was in dynamic relationship with the source. Yeshua wanted his students to concentrate on their own connection with the source rather than idolizing him. And they had difficulty with it. They kept saying, how do we do this? Yet he tried to show them in his everyday life how to connect with source. Yeshua also wanted each person to recognize their own uniqueness, their own gifts and service. And yet within that uniqueness, he explained it was inseparable from their source, the greater whole. I love that connection, a connection we often don't make, or I didn't make, as clearly through perhaps Jungian studies. As I have worked with Yeshua's teaching, along with Neil's books and courses, I have a greater awareness of my source, in Jungian terms, my big self, as being within my body, while all the while being without and all around my being. There's no inner and outer in the Aramaic way of thinking. It is one. I have had the joy of realizing that my small self is held within the source of my being, where I'm able to experience oneness. It's a beautiful sense of it. And later, I will share my experience of oneness toward the end of the presentation and how oneness was expressed through my work with Heart Math Institute and influenced by this presentation. The Ancient Self. Lawrence J. Hattab, in his book Myth and Philosophy, A Contest of Truths, beautifully characterizes the ancient self as self in the midst of nature, self in the midst of community, self in the midst of a sacred other. And for years I have loved and thought about ancients in this way and self in this way. Currently, in a talk by Rupert Sheldrake delivered at St. James Church, Piccadilly in London, England, in June of this year, Sheldrake challenged the current worldview that nature is mechanical and atheistic by inviting us to re-enchant our understanding of reality by recognizing the sacred presence in all of nature. He claims, of course, nature is alive and that we both exist within God and God within us. He reinforces Yeshua's teachings, Neil's work, and my understanding. So, how does Neil invite us into a re-enchanted worldview? He does this by turning to our beginnings, our creation stories. Neil announces this in the prologue of the book. He encourages us to consider creation stories in a different way to which we know and perceive them, one that is much more unified, less individualistic, and open to the sacredness of all life. He frames this through Semitic, experiential, mystical lenses, as opposed to the linear, objective narrative of facts that we are so familiar with. For example, the Genesis story is described as being a living, ongoing process embodied in each person, in each moment, rather than a 7-day series of events that happened once. Neil emphasizes this ongoing aspect of creation within us. And if we think that there is no past, present, and future, and time and space is lifted, we're there in Genesis 1. Beginning is seen as an ongoing process of emergence, creativity, and participation in the divine mystery, the moment of creation, rather than an ending, an apocalyptic ending, which we have tended in the Western world to concentrate on. Beginnings are far more viable and fun. For Neil, meditating on beginnings is a way to access our creative potential and wholeness of life. Through the lens of the Aramaic language and the Semitic cosmology, the relationship between seeming opposites, separate entities such as heaven and earth, body and spirit, language and thought, are seen as being in a dynamic, balanced relationship within a single living field. I think that is gorgeous. In this way, when differences arise and are conflicting, we're whole to encourage them, the paradox of them together, as we enter the great mystery of the unknown, until a way of reconciliation comes forward, balancing and synthesizing the opposites. It's moving out of light and into darkness and seeing what emerges. Just a different way of thinking. And Neil points out a critical mistranslation in the Genesis creation. The King James Version of Genesis 1 and 28, a statement that God makes after having finished the 7 days of creation, reads as you see on the slide. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over everything that moveth upon the earth." Neil Douglas-Klotz interprets this verse through his understanding of the Aramaic language. He begins by seeing humans as fundamentally kin with all of nature. Similarly to the way that Plato wrote in the Meno, all of nature is akin. A profound statement. So rather than advocating power over, as the Genesis King James Version suggests, Neil advocates the concept power with, not power over. Power with being a participatory, cooperative relationship with all of nature where humility, deep respect, and stewardship exists. This single misrepresentation has deeply shaped our Western experience. Sir Francis Bacon, 1561 to 1626, although a Christian, passionately believed that his God-given role was that of having dominion and control of nature. In his view, nature had to be hounded in her wanderings, bound into service, and made a slave. As Richard Bernstein penned in 1992, the domination and control of nature inexorably became the domination of men over men, and indeed men over women. Albeit the patriarchy was well underway long before Yeshua's time, domination was accentuated in our time, I believe, through the work of Bacon and Descartes. René Descartes in 1596 to 1650 created the conceptual framework of nature as a perfect machine. And he exclaimed his famous cognito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, and initiated a new concept of the self where mind and body is irreparably split. His ideas advanced the age of reason, and reason, Bernstein notes, became the cherished concept of the age of enlightenment. And Bernstein further argued that the misleading and distractive dichotomy advanced us into the grip of either or out of the both and concept that had shaped the ancient worldview. And those of us who are caring about the new paradigm are seeing that move back to both and as opposed to either or. So upon recognizing a participatory relationship with nature, Neil advocates that we are empowered to create with all that is in a creative partnership with the beloved, the one in the ongoing act of creation and in the ongoing act of consciousness. He writes, "It is I can rather than I am." Neil describes the first human being as one who is deeply interconnected with all of nature, living within a web of relationships, growing, learning, evolving through all relationships. in which I is always connected with we. As Dr. Dan Siegel points out, or he coins, it's mui, not me or we, but mui. So I can becomes inclusive with we can, and we'll talk more about that later. Neil notes in the Genesis creation record that the first human is masculine and feminine. The primordial human isn't initially split into two genders, rather contains and expresses both aspects of masculine and feminine, hence representing wholeness. And Neil encourages us to embrace this wholeness throughout his meditations. Such wholeness invites us to affirm the sacredness of the feminine alongside the sacredness of the masculine, hence challenging the privileging of the patriarchy and male dominance, which we continue to experience today. So this brings me to yet another aspect of the creation story I see as being important in understanding Yeshua and his teaching. Neil recognizes holy wisdom, hakama in Aramaic, chokmah in Hebrew, and Sophia in Greek, as a living, dynamic presence in the creation of the world at the very beginning, and of central importance in the journey through the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes in this book, Neil's book. The creation story in Proverbs 8 and 9, because the creation story appears and reappears throughout scriptures. And also, I want to point out here before I go further that Neil considers many original stories, Hebrew ones, Islamic ones, and Christian ones, in Genesis Now, his book, that was later called Original Meditations. They're beautifully outlined and they have much to teach us. So although I'm focusing on one story, of the story of Genesis, there are many more. So the creation story in Proverbs 8 and 9 speaks of holy wisdom as being the partner of Yahweh, the everlasting, the ever-living life, God in Hebrew, who together formed the universe and material reality. They were both there at the beginning, says Proverbs. Holy wisdom in Proverbs says, the Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first acts of long ago, ages ago, I was set up. At the first, before the beginning of the earth, when there were no depths, I was brought forth. When he established the earth, I was there. I was beside him like a master worker, and I was his daily delight. And holy wisdom is woven into the fabric of creation, actively shaping and guiding creation's emergence. Wisdom in creation signifies that everything is made purposefully, reflecting divine intelligence and order. Wisdom's dynamic, it's playful, joyful, delighting in creation and humanity and the cosmic drama. Holy wisdom loves pouring herself out in love, inviting everyone to come to her table and eat and drink with her. She's the creative, feminine presence at the heart of spiritual life. Holy wisdom is both embodied and offered as nourishment. She is what connects us to the sacred unity of all existence. Isn't that gorgeous? Yeshua is the embodiment of holy wisdom. Yeshua's teachings invite us into an intimate relationship with wisdom, one that enlivens and heals and guides from within. She gathers together all the voices of our small selves around her table, good voices and difficult voices, problematic voices, and she nourishes each as they eat and drink and recover from trauma. She integrates our small selves with the source of consciousness itself, with the beloved. To help my understanding of historical references with respect to creation stories, I've included Anne Baring's books and Betty Kovach's books and Betty Kovach's YouTube film. Both women have so beautifully discussed and presented history in such a different way. And even with this presentation over today, I will go back to those sources because they have so much to offer us. And in fact, Rupert Sheldrake's talk at St. James Church that I mentioned earlier fits well in with Anne and Betty's books. So Yeshua's time. Yeshua lived and worked in Judea, Galilee, and Nazareth under the rule of the Roman Empire. These areas had been taken over by Assyrian, Babylonian, Persian, and Hellenistic rule over time prior to the Romans conquering the area. Each empire captured whom they thought were elite, and they left the poor behind. And Neil suggests that the Aramaic language was in this way preserved in and among the poor. By Yeshua's time, poverty was rampant. There were many homeless, many wandering the streets without food. They were ill and uncared for. They were all looking for a Messiah to rescue them. So, in fact, many groups and gangs gathered together, and each of them had a Messiah or thought to be Messiah that existed alongside of Yeshua, because they were looking for holy wisdom to gather them together at her table. And Pharisees during Yeshua's time were influential teachers and strict interpreters of Jewish law. They were often present with Yeshua in synagogues, public gatherings, and debates. And tension between Pharisees and Yeshua was high, as you can imagine. Pharisees were constantly challenging or testing Yeshua, accusing him of breaking their traditions, such as healing on the Sabbath, associating with sinners, and neglecting purity rituals. They tried to trap him and undermine his authority. Yeshua, on the other hand, criticized the Pharisees for their hypocrisy and their focus on external compliance with the law, as opposed to paying attention to their own internal righteousness and compassion. Not all Pharisees were hostile, such as Nicodemus, that Neil mentions in the book, who was sympathetic and curious about Yeshua's teachings. Other Pharisees who were fond of Yeshua warned him of danger. The number and passion of people following Yeshua threatened both the Pharisees and the Roman rule. Rome controlled the Pharisees, and they were heavily under the jurisdiction of Rome, and hence treated Yeshua very badly. The Sadducees were mostly from priestly and the aristocratic class. They controlled the temple and the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the Jewish ruling council. And two high priests were key figures in Yeshua's arrest and trial. They did not agree with Yeshua theologically or politically. When Yeshua spoke truth to power and overthrew the merchants' tables set up in the temple, denouncing its commerce and corruption, Yeshua was directly attacking the source of income and power for the Sadducees. They played a primary role in condemning Yeshua and delivering him to Roman authorities. Sadducees saw Yeshua as a threat to orthodoxy, and the Romans saw Yeshua as a threat to political stability. So, regardless of this, even in the presence of this rule, Yeshua fed the poor. He gathered everyone around his table with no exclusions whatsoever. He met a woman at a well from another jurisdiction, a story that some of us may be familiar with. And he treated her with such respect and compassion and invited her into conversation with him, much to her surprise. She said, "But you're from Judea." She couldn't believe that he would be so interested in her, and so full of compassion and love for her. Yeshua healed people of illness and trauma. In scripture, they often say demons, and I'm often wondering if the demons are what we may call trauma today. And he spoke power to truth, as I already mentioned. Tragically, Yeshua was arrested and cruelly murdered, something I have never gotten over and can't wrap my head around. It is so awful. So this brings us to our time and my story. How can Yeshua's life and work influence us? Can we do any of the things that he did? And so I thought, well, the first thing I better do is look at our times and carefully compare them with Yeshua's times. So I turned to Noam Chomsky on YouTube, as I love the way that Noam narrates history with great precision, accuracy, and he also speaks truth to power. I pulled up the latest Chomsky video, one from 2024. And although I wondered about the video as I knew Chomsky had suffered a stroke in 2023, I did embark on listening to the video. And 3/4 of the way through the video, a blank black screen opened up and a white line of print appeared across the screen saying, "This video is permanently removed from YouTube." Having gone through reading about Yeshua's experiences, I first wondered if the video was removed as it was threatening the powers that be that control YouTube. And I mentioned this at a writers' meetup with Victoria Moore and Laura Madsen, and we all puzzled about the disappearance of the video. At that time, we accepted that it was taken away. And so to assist me with investigating our times, since the Noam Chomsky video disappeared, Laura asked me if I had attended Linda White's Great Books presentation on One Nation Under Blackmail, written by the investigative journalist Whitney Webb. Well, I had not. In fact, Linda's presentation occurred in May and June of 2024, just after my husband passed away, so I realized why I had not attended that great book seminar. So that evening, I decided to listen to Linda's presentation. It was a Wednesday evening, and it was riveting. Linda did a superb job of following the many threads of alliances that forged during the mid-20th century, enabling networks of clandestine control and corruption that profoundly influenced the course of modern America and global politics, especially through the methods of sexual blackmail, as currently seen in the case of Jeffrey Epstein. At the end of this watching the 2 full hours, I fell into despair. Our circumstances were as bad as Yeshua's, if not worse. I felt powerless, lost, and isolated. And as I listened to the book review that Linda provided, I kept recalling many people who spoke truth to power. Paulo Freire, the outstanding educator working with the oppressed in South America, who was jailed for 20 years. Of Martin Luther King, who was murdered. And Nelson Mandela, jailed for years. And our current world situation played before me. The war in Ukraine, the awful event of October 6 in Israel, the Gaza war, and the fact that Greg Braden mentioned there are many other wars happening that we don't even hear about, at least 26 more globally. And I began to question why I offered Neil's book. Yeshua was murdered. What was I thinking about? Was I so naive in thinking the revelations of the Aramaic Jesus was a book for our time? And this depression did not leave me throughout Tuesday and into Friday. My entire central nervous system had been triggered through Whitney Webb's revelations, and with what I was seeing and happening today around me. Many of my experiences, for example, with the patriarchy throughout my life, surfaced to the fore. And I began to think, I can't do part 2 of the Great Books course. With my nursing background, I believe that what I was teaching was true. If I taught something, I knew it worked. For example, when I taught nurses how to respond to a patient in critical care who was crashing, the nurses needed to know exactly what to do, and it had to work. And now I wondered if saying this book was this a book for our time true, or was it not true? So mid-afternoon on Friday, I thought, I must put this book to the test. I will meditate with Neil. In fact, I had been listening to Neil's audible book, I Am, presented by Sounds True, prior to this depression setting in. So I pulled the book up on my computer, and it was at the meditation at the end of chapter 9. And I decided to use this meditation. To understand Neil's meditations, I'll explain that he begins with chanting and singing. Then he has us just breathe with music and feel with the words. And then we end in silence. So I thought, to assess my level of coherence, I'm going to monitor my heart rate variability with the Heart Math Institute monitor. And so I did. I attached myself up, and the monitor told me I was far from being coherent. My heart rate variability was chaotic. So I left the monitor on and I began the meditation. And at the end of the meditation, the end of silence, My heart rate variability remained chaotic. I waited. I waited for quite a period of time. Didn't leave the room, just waited and did the meditation again, and I remained in chaos. A third time, I began the meditation and I felt myself slipping for a moment into coherence, but noted at the end of the silence I was in chaos. So I thought, well, I will give this one more try. And the fourth time, during silence at the end of the meditation, I felt a shift in my body, so much so that I have opened my closed eyes and noticed that I had not only slipped into coherence, but the coherence had increased in a straight line up to the height of coherence. I cannot tell you the joy I felt. It was blissful. It was ecstatic. It felt as I did when I whirled with Boniface Syed during her course, where she taught us how to whirl and become one with the beloved. It reminded me of our dear Andrew Harvey, encouraging us in the midst of blackness and chaos to put the music on and begin to dance and dance into ecstasy. Ecstasy. I knew at that moment, as I emerged from that meditation, that holy wisdom had gathered me into her arms, calmed the voices circling around my small self, and brought me into oneness with the one of whom she was part. And at that moment, I thought, yes, I will, pardon me, present part 2 for the Great Books course. Later, Linda White met with me and listened compassionately to my experience and encouraged me to share. So, Linda, thank you for that. I know you're here. So, in the end, this presentation is not about me. It became about we. The support I have had in creating this book review is critical. I've had support from Victoria, from Laura, from Georgie, from Linda. This book is all about we can. It is about we can co-create a new paradigm. We can work with the evolving new consciousness and create a rich ongoing consciousness with beloved. In fact, we can even go to the State of the Nation Forum in December and listen to the voices of the shamanic people, the voices of nature, the voices of extraterrestrial beings and AI to find new ways to heal and new ways to transform the world. I also felt we can feed the poor. We can heal the sick. Look what other people who are interconnected with us at Ubiquity, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, Gabor Mate, Basil Vanderkolk, and many others. They're healing the sick. We can do it too. If we become one with one, the one will work through us to the healing. At Heart Math, in the trauma program, the heart-centered trauma program, we were taught right at the beginning of the program that we need to be in coherence to begin to work with the other. We need to be in a state of oneness, the state of oneness that Yeshua talks about, before we begin to go into counsel with another, before we teach, before we do our dissertations and our thesis, before we offer a class. We can also work with Mother Earth and climate change, and we can speak to truth, and we can speak truth to power as Yeshua did. We can. But we can't do it alone. As scholars, we need to work together. So I look forward to working together with our president, Jim Garrison, Humanity Rising in the State of the Forum in December, as we listen to those voices I mentioned and search for new ways to heal and shape our future and heal the earth. We can, as Rumi poetically says, beyond right and wrongdoing, there's a field. Meet me there. Along with creating this program, I've been listening to Handel's beautiful work on, and it's going to leave me for half a moment. I've been listening to Chloe Goodchild's song based on Rumi's poem, and Handel's divine source of our divine, our light divine, source of light of our light divine. It's gorgeous, and I've listened to it over and over again, and I've included both those pieces on the PDF because I found that I needed, along with Neil's work, to work with poetry, to work with song, and follow all the variety of ways that Neil recommends that we can begin to learn and to know. So yes, Aramaic, the revelation of the Aramaic Jesus is a book for our time. In the next slide, I'm offering a special thanks to Dr. Neil Douglas-Klotz for generously sharing the beautiful version of the Lord's Prayer that he sent me for this presentation. And I won't going to end again, but this time playing the last few minutes of this version of the prayer. I will stop sharing and pass it back to you, Georgie.
Thank you, Janice. Oh my gosh, I really loved the whole presentation of the powerful ending. Thank you. The prayer, Yeshua's prayer song, it was just touching my heart and soul in every way. And yes, the ending was powerful. I loved how you articulated the we can, that alone we can't. It was absolutely outstandingly and well articulated. Thank you also for including your own story and referencing Linda White's fantastic presentation from last year. I have two questions, if I may, before we turn to our audience. One of which is that if there was a young person, maybe a Gen Z or maybe even younger, asking you that and how in what ways would this book and its message help my life, what would you say to him or her?
Well, actually, I have a number of nieces and nephews who are exactly in that category, and they know I'm doing this book. And so when I talk to them about it, well, for example, with one of them, he created the music at the end. He took the little bit out of the big portion that Neil sent, and so music and gave him an entry into the book and opened him up to the book. And he was most interested to hear about how, and he's in his 30s, and he just thought, this is the music touched him.
Mm.
And then when we began to talk about the concepts of the book, he's a deep thinker. This guy's philosophical. That touched him. So I knew my audience. So I find I have to know my audience. Whereas I have a niece, for example, who is an artist and master's in science and working for the government, working with indigenous people, in fact, and animals. And so I raised it to her. She wanted to know what I was doing because we chat back and forth. So I talked to her a little bit about the book. And her response was, "That's great, Aunt Janice. I'll look at it later." So I don't know, I know her well enough that later will come. But I find I have to be, with anything like this, sensitive to where the person is at. I need to be in coherence myself, even to bring it up as a book.
Mm.
I could extend that to my classes at York University with nurses who are in their end of their fourth year. How would they respond? Um, I can answer that partly from the fact that I taught ethics, medical ethics and legal ethics. They were very open to this type of thing. They were hungry to find another way. They loved the meditations I began my classes with. So my response is, I think it's how we do it. I think they're hungry.
Mm. Well, it's so clear the love of the book, the way you talked about it, that was just really coming through the Zoom screen so clearly. The other question is that I know that you reread the book several times to prepare for this lecture. What were the those revelations, those really significant ones that you didn't have the first time you read the book?
Uh-huh. Um, the ones I presented today, Holy Wisdom started to jump off the page for me because especially through the Beatitudes, he will bring out holy wisdom. I understand her in a way I never did before, but I do have to qualify it because when I was young and I was brought up in a family where we mainly paid attention to Old Testament Jewish scriptures, I noticed that there was someone in Genesis who was there and not mentioned. I noticed the wise woman in Proverbs. I noticed what she had to say. And I pondered that a lot. And in my search to find the feminine face of God, she was there. But is it because I studied nursing and had a whole different practice? I didn't develop that. I didn't pursue it. And now, meeting Anne Baring, Betty Kovach, and Neil, and going through the Beatitudes, she is so important to me.
What's the difference in your understanding between wisdom and holy wisdom? What differentiates?
I don't have a difference. If wisdom, okay, I'll put it this way: if wisdom happens when we are at one with the one, we are in oneness with the other. Wisdom then flows from the other through us and back out. I don't think the wisdom of my small self from my day-to-day life is real wisdom. It's more knowledge. But real wisdom, I believe, has to come from the source as light, divine source of light, as Handel says, through me and back out. That's how I differentiate it.
Beautiful. Thank you. I very much agree, yes. Now let's turn to our audience because it's past the top of the hour. Santu asked at the beginning, and maybe others as well, that when you get a chance, would you mind to put your website in the chat box, please? And Santu is asking what was the second female name. That was Betty Kovac. And Leo actually referenced him just a couple of minutes ago in the chat box. Betty Kovac's book. She is absolutely amazing and outstanding.
Yeah.
And you didn't get the message that Deborah left. She left a message privately to you. She didn't actually put it in the public section. But given that hopefully Linda is still here, Linda White, I really would like to ask her if she would, yes, Linda, hello dear. Would you mind to share some of your reflections when you spoke with Janice and or anything you would like to share with us based on her two presentations?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. And oh my goodness, Janice, it was absolutely beautiful. And I think what stayed with me well, there are a couple things. One, the cadence of your voice gave such testimony to the meditations and the reflections in the book. When I was listening to the content of everything that you shared, but just the cadence of your voice really, I felt it, through my whole nervous system. And I was also very struck by the visual of the holy wisdom in the women. And so, Georgie, I love your two questions, one about the youth of today and then the difference between wisdom and holy wisdom. And I think, my response to the holy wisdom is the we that you brought out and the power of the women in a circle. And also the honoring that you've done by naming so many people in your presentation. You really did a beautiful job of weaving the power of we in this work. So that's kind of the initial reflections. In relation to the conversation that Janice and I had, I guess I'll go back to, Georgie, your question with the teens or the 30-somethings, that in my 30s, I studied Buddhism. And it was with Jetsama Akamlamo. And on one of our retreats, she had us read the news, go deeply into the news. The whole retreat was building our capacity for taking in the suffering of the world. And prior to that point, I was still kind of aligned with love, light, and bliss. And it was a very, very powerful opening for me. And I think that's partly, you did a really beautiful job of balancing. We have to take care of our own central nervous system. But at the same time, as we're evolving, we're developing the capacity to take in more and more of life. And we're taking on the metabolizing of it. And so our conversation was really valuable and special to me because, I am protective in my conversations with people of how much their capacity is, to take in so much of the suffering of the world. And it was really beautiful, our conversation and your willingness to bring it into, your personal experience into the teaching. And I think we need more of that, and this is what, so beautiful about Ubiquity.
Mhm.
It really invites us to bring, the depth of the coursework and our understanding into, relationship with our own lives and what's happening in the world. And of course, with what's exploding right now with the whole Epstein. And I mean, it's I really want to go back to that material and go a little bit deeper into it, to see where we're going in the future. So there's a lot more I could say, but I know there's other people on the course, so I'll pause there.
No, do say it, Linda. Do say it. We'd like to hear what you would like to share with us. We still have plenty of time.
Well, I think as you know, my passion is disembedding truth from conspiracy. And it really is building the capacity of, supporting others in building capacity to take in the suffering. And the more of us that do that in groups. And so I guess what I will say also is, having had a mentor for 22 years, our most common conversation was about evil, because I couldn't understand why there had to be evil in the world. And interestingly, with her passing, it made a lot more sense. But I liked the reference you made, or it was kind of a question, but could evil be trauma? Is trauma the modern day version of evil? And I think that was a really valuable insight, that our language has changed. And yet, what also struck me is the value of what Neil has done is going back to the original translation, and so there's kind of this juxtaposition between our modern day language and yet also getting back to the origin, of the original meaning. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is not a whole lot has changed. We are evolving, but it seems like we're kind of working on the same issues all these years later. And yet I think that the key is the collective, the more of us that are aligning with truth and shared meaning, the more I think we're going to evolve.
Thank you. Beautiful words. Is there anything, Janice, you would like to?
Yeah, I just can't thank Linda enough, both for her work and her comments today. By meeting with Linda, and Linda, you're right, we need to do more of this together. You gave me the courage to do this. And Laura and Victoria did as well. But in meeting with you, you also mentioned suffering to me. And that was important. Our capacity to take suffering in and deal with it. It's huge. And you also encouraged me. I mean, you were bluntly straightforward. Look, a lot of spiritual masters are killed, like Yeshua. People who really care about things like this are in jeopardy. That helped me. I mean, it's not a nice thought, but it helped me. And also, I think your discussion of good and evil with me was very helpful as well, Linda. I just see so much value in this conversation today with us and in the conversations we had prior to me doing this. I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for your presence and for being such a great colleague and friend to us all.
Yeah. It's
Thank
just really
you.
an honor to be part. I really do look at the Ubiquity family,
Mhm.
and we're all doing it together.
Yes, absolutely. We can together. We can. Thank you, dear.
There's one other thing that struck me too was the II.
Yeah.
Ken Wilber uses the II, and obviously it means Integral Institute, but he uses it in the same way that you so beautifully presented. And so I was struck by that too, that there's so many different pathways, but if we just keep aligning with the wisdom and applying it to, our own perception of life and help to the best of our ability to evolve it, towards good. And, that I love the phrase you said too, that light is prevailing. So.
Thank you, Linda. And Laura read my mind because I was going to call upon her and she put her hand up. So, Laura, dear, let's hear from you. Thank you for joining us. Laura, can you hear us? Hello, hello. Laura?
I'm wondering if you need to mute me, maybe?
Well, I can mute you. And Laura, dear, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, no, we can hear you. Maybe speak a little bit louder.
Okay, I can speak a little louder. Beautiful presentation, Janice. You did your dive and you came out smelling roses. I love the shit because that's often what happens when we meet the deep question, and it often takes us to something that looks like depression and hopelessness. And you reached out, you did what you needed to do for those 3 or 4 days, and I'm just really like your path in relation to the material that came up in One Nation Under Blackmail. Your relation with that was a teaching to all of us, that you stayed with it, and you at one point thought you couldn't do the presentation, and then you met a deeper dimension of yourself through your willingness to engage. And I just feel that's an amazing example. I just had a couple of things that I found myself taking notes when I was listening a little bit. And I love the Lord's Prayer. It's one of my regular things. I say it in Aramaic, actually. And that's because my master's is in theology. So I took 4 years of deep dive into the teachings. And it's a transmission. And that prayer came out of his disciples asking him, I don't know if Neil mentions that, it was a question to him from his disciples saying, how do we do what you do? And that's where the Lord's Prayer emerged out of that question. So again, and I heard this in your presentation, it's a response to. So, like with your nursing students and with your nieces and nephew, where people are, like us having enough sensitivity to know where they're at and how much we can say and how we say it and the whole thing. And then I love the nature is alive thing. I mean, that is now a group that I offer 4 times a year just in my backyard here. That is attuning to nature. And I had one just on that, a quick story. The last one was a woman who lives about 3 hours from Vancouver in the mountains with her partner, and is in nature a lot. And we share at the end of the day. Oh, I don't hear you, Georgia.
Sorry, like, would you mind to get closer to your computer because it's not very easy to hear you. Yeah, we have to put our mic and one of the attendees on to set as well. It's
Okay.
difficult a little bit.
I'll just move the computer closer, maybe. There. A little bit closer. Is that better?
Teeny tiny bit.
Oh, John, I don't know what's going on. I'm wondering. I had headphones on earlier. I wonder if that's interfering.
Probably the headphones are not the best. That's what I experienced.
No.
Yeah, it's much better.
Oh, it's better. I put my headphones back in. How weird is that?
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry about that.
that's all
Anyway,
right.
just to say what opens when we attune to nature. This woman who's always in nature, she's always hiking, she has a sailboat, she's just Miss Nature. So it was really amazing to hear her say at the end of this day, she said, I'm always in nature, and she's about in her early 60s. I have never listened to nature. It blew her away. She said it in such a quiet voice, we all had to kind of lean into what she was saying because it kind of stunned her. She didn't realize that uh, she'd never received it. She'd never listened, and you could feel it vibrating in her body, like it totally changed her. Because this is just a backyard with trees, and that's all we do. We hang out and look and feel and touch and smell and be by herself. And anyway, that was such a lesson. And then also when I was studying theology, as I mentioned, I got my master's in that. You might not have heard a lot of what I said, but not just the Lord's Prayer being a response, and how that's part of the we is learning to listen, to respond to where another is. And that's how the Lord's Prayer came about, is his disciples asking. And then the other thing, the Hebrew language, the ancient Hebrew, this is what I learned when I was in school, it doesn't have past and future. It's only a present tense language. So it's been translated into God created, like it's done deal, but it's actually God is creating forever and ever and ever and ever. Like it's God is continually creating. And then I loved your description of holy wisdom, that playful delight and the feminine quality in that, the Sophia, the dance of beauty that lives, actually for me, she lives in the belly. She's very earthy, and that's where I like to dance from. Yeah. So thank you, Janice. I won't go on. There's probably other people. I'm awfully sorry about my volume. I should have twigged it was something to do with my earbuds. Anyway, thank you again. Just a beautiful, beautiful presentation. And I've loved the questions and the community you created around you in this process is just lovely.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
thank
Laura.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your comments. And now Victoria put her hand up. So let's hear from her.
Okay. Dear Janice, that was such a marvelous, marvelous presentation. Thank you so very much. I'm so glad that you shared with us and had shared with me earlier about your journey and how the third time you began meditation and you were still in chaos, and that shift in your body came and you slipped into coherence, you said. And that coherence had increased and became blissful and ecstatic, and you became one with the beloved. That was so beautiful, so beautifully said. And I just so appreciate your sharing it to us, with us. And you said, holy wisdom gathered me into her arms and brought me into oneness. I love that. It brings tears to my eyes, dear Janice. And you talk then about how we can hope and we can look at a new paradigm and a new consciousness, and that we can find new ways to heal and change the world and renew the environment and the world around us. It was just lovely. And of course, that music, just as the first time you played that fabulous, wonderful music at the end. And I was so glad that your nephew and is your niece, as you were talking about, are connecting with you about this, and that this work through you, through the book, is through you affecting them too, and who knows who else that they connect with, which is so wonderful. And that poetry and song and dance just fill and help renew and move along our creativity and our imagination. And you've been so involved with imagination and creativity with your work, with your dissertation. And I thought it all just went together seamlessly. And I just thank you for that.
I'd love to respond to you, Victoria and Laura and Linda. Is holy wisdom working through all of us? This isn't my presentation. This is holy wisdom speaking. And because of our relationships and because of the sharing and support, I have tears in my eyes. I only thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Laura, Linda, and a big thank you to you, Janice. Amazing, beautiful, heart-filled and felt presentation. Yeah, that's the love between us from you, emanating from you, from holy wisdom or from source is just palpable for sure. Chris said that she missed the first hour. Not to worry, in a couple of days' time, the recording will be on our YouTube channel. And if you would like to reach out to Janice, then you can do so. What's the best way, Janice, to contact you?
I think, let me see. I can put put everyone here. If it's a general question through the Great Books discussion on ubiquity, if it's a more dialogue that we want, I would suggest my email, which I will also put in the web, and I will also put my Create website on as well. And that is being developed in the next month, where I will be having some of this material on it, because I have a new learning management system I'm working with, and my nephew is coming from Africa to help with it in September. So I will put my Create site there, and I'll put my email.
Okay, you're doing it now. Yes, because Santu is asking about it. Why are you typing? Then I'm slowly going to say goodbye to you all. Please join us in a month's time, where Margot Borden, another wonderful colleague at Ubiquity, and also a Ubiquity graduate, will talk us about her chosen book, which is How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. So that will be September 9th and October 14th. If for whatever reason you can't make it, then you can always watch each presentation on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Janice, again for these two amazing presentations. Definitely another beautiful hue in this rainbow of colors of Ubiquity community. Deep gratitude to you and to all those who joined us and contributed today. Stay well and safe, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Deep gratitude to you, Georgie.
Thank
It's
you.
your love that's carrying us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.